welcome back to my channel. So I recently put out a poll on my YouTube community page asking you guys which fragrance you wanted to see a review on next, and there were a total of 4 options, and over 50% of everyone voted for Vanilla Milk by Ellis Brooklyn. So we're gonna be reviewing that fragrance today. If you're new to my channel, definitely make sure to subscribe, and if you're coming back, thank you as always for stopping by. And yeah, let's just get right into this review. I actually got a tester of this bottle because the 50 ml bottle of Vanilla Milk retails for like $108, and I was like, yeah, like I'm not paying that. So for now, I'm just using this like gold cap as a substitute. Anyways, let's quickly go over the notes and main accords. On Fragrantica, it has vanilla, lactonic, warm spicy, woody, powdery, cacao, amber, balsamic, sweet, and musky for the main accords. And as for the top notes, we have milk, peony, frangipani, and jasmine. Middle notes of bourbon vanilla, Madagascar vanilla, and cacao pod, and base notes of benzoin, amyris, sandalwood, and musk. So I'm gonna say right off the bat, even though it has this like very extensive and kind of sophisticated note pyramid, I don't wanna say that it like lacks complexity, but I think for me, whenever I smell Vanilla Milk, there's only one thing that I can smell. And let's just do a quick spray right now. Oh. Okay, so there's definitely an initial blast of alcohols. It has all of these notes, but the one thing that I really smell is vanilla extract. And I'm talking like the actual like alcohol-based like vanilla extract that you use for baking. I feel like I always make this comparison whenever I come across like a very vanilla heavy fragrance. I'll always kind of compare it to vanilla extract, like how similar it is to that just like vanilla and its like purest, most concentrated, sweetest, like most edible form, which in my eyes is like something along the lines of vanilla extract. But I've really never come across a fragrance that is so literally photographically identical to vanilla extract. And I know I've said a similar thing about Vanille by Sully Notes, but this one, Vanilla Milk, is even more so. Like it literally, this smells so much like vanilla extract to me that it literally sometimes feels like I'm just like taking like a little like thing of like vanilla extract and like putting drops like all over my body. And I guess that leads me on to my next point, which is kind of the public reception of this fragrance. Out of over 200 votes, Vanilla Milk by Ellis Brooklyn is rated an average of 3 out of 5 stars on Fragrantica, which, to put it into perspective, actually, I don't even know how to put that into perspective. It's just really bad. Like, people seem to find this scent to be extremely controversial, and I have to say I completely agree. I feel like I'm super drawn to these like vanilla heavy, like really gourmand scents, but even this one I think is just a little bit too much. I'll kind of go more in depth about that in a second, but I think for the majority of people, it is definitely just way too polarizing. I think it's definitely a lot. Like usually with a vanilla heavy fragrance, it has other notes to kind of balance it out, but even though Vanilla Milk has notes like peony and frangipani, jasmine, like some of these more floral notes and some woody notes and musks to kind of round out the fragrance and prevent it from being too overwhelming, I really only just get this super sharp and potent vanilla extract. When I first smelled Vanilla Milk in person, I was at Sephora and I sprayed it on a tester, and I was actually blown away because I truly have never smelled anything like it. I really do think that this fragrance is extremely unique. There's just nothing on the market that smells so heavily vanillic in the way that this fragrance does. So I really did like it when I smelled it in person, and I feel like the more and more that I wear it and play around with it, the more I understand why this is such a widely hated fragrance. There are very few fragrances that see as much public hate as this fragrance does, which is honestly just so understandable. It doesn't smell bad by any means to me. In fact, like even though it's so like overwhelmingly sweet and vanillic, it doesn't really turn gross on my skin. But okay, I'm gonna segue into my next point, which is that it is through Vanilla Milk by Ellis Brooklyn that I kind of finally understood what the balsamic accord smells like. So I feel like I always see balsamic as a main accord, but I never really like understand that, or like that never really paints a picture to me of how a fragrance smells. But I've heard before to kind of compare it to balsamic vinegar. I know that is kind of where we see the word balsamic the most frequently. The thing is, like, there really aren't fragrances out there that like straight up smell like balsamic vinegar, so that's kind of like been a point of confusion for me. But if you think about vinegar, it has this very potent kind of like concentrated tanginess. I don't know how to describe it, but vinegar doesn't smell dry. It doesn't smell really powdery. It smells very like
wet.
And that's like the kind of concentrated type smell that I'm talking about, along with this very like kind of alcohol-y, tangy, acidic sourness of vinegar. That's kind of what I would describe a balsamic smelling fragrance to be. And so while I think Vanilla Milk is so beautiful, like a really truly just delicious, like complete gourmand vanilla when it comes to clothing or in the air or on a test strip, on the skin is definitely a different story, and that's where I started to find issues with this fragrance. So while this doesn't turn foul or just like musty smelling on my skin like some of these like really super sweet and cheap fragrances do, literally like the only thing I'm thinking of is Midnight Fantasy by Britney Spears. Like just like these like really cheap fragrances that have way too much sweetness, they just do not interact well with my skin, and that's the kind of sweetness that I cannot stand. But I don't get that kind of foulness from the dry down on skin of Vanilla Milk. Instead, this is where the kind of balsamic accord, why do I keep air quoting balsamic? This is where the kind of balsamic smell really starts to come through. So I've seen a lot of people reviewing this fragrance compare it to smelling like sour milk. And when I first started using this fragrance, I totally thought that that was like an exaggeration. I was like, no, like sour milk is like disgusting. Like that's literally like old, like spoiled, like rotting milk. Like there's no way that this fragrance smells like that. But now that I've worn it on my skin for quite some time, I can definitely kind of see where people are getting that sour milk analogy, because it does just turn a little bit acidic. It turns balsamic, as I was describing. That's what creates this kind of tanginess that takes away from the delicious and just beautiful gourmand vanilla in the opening. That is the main point of contention. Let's get straight into the actual rating portion. So let's first talk presentation. So even though I don't have the cap, it's just like a plain like white cap, like really standard, I want to briefly talk about this bottle. Everything about this bottle to me just screams cheap. And I know that sounds kind of aggressive, but like when you see this kind of a bottle with just like a rectangular sticker on the front, you would think that it's maybe like $30 to $40, right? Like it doesn't look expensive at all. Like that's something that is more characteristic of a fragrance that is really affordable. But this thing is over $100 for a 50 ml, and I have to say that I literally hate the presentation. I just don't really understand how. Okay, let me like put this into context. This label to me looks like I was in 4th grade and I went on like Google Drawings and then I typed out Vanilla Milk, but then the font was too big and there wasn't enough space in the text box. But I also didn't know how to make the text box bigger, so then it just started like starting new lines, and then I just like left it like that. Like that's what this looks like. It just looks really, really tacky in my opinion. For like a fragrance that's this expensive, like I would definitely expect something a lot more classy. It's just that like when I have this fragrance like sitting on my desk or vanity, whatever, and I have this one next to it, it's like, what is this one even doing there? Like it looks so ugly and depressing. And like obviously I don't expect every fragrance to be like a work of art like the Libre perfumes are, but this one is just so tacky. There is just nothing about the presentation that justifies it being like over $100 for me. Like it just doesn't really make sense to me. We've established now that in the air, in clothing, and on test strips, this smells like super realistic vanilla extract. It's really, really delicious, really sweet, really creamy and rich. But on the skin is kind of where I start to have issues with it. That's when it turns kind of sour, and I think that that's where most people are having issues with it. While I personally think that it has the potential to smell really, really good. Like I love spraying this over my clothes, and this also mixes so well with so many other like really sweet vanillic gourmand fragrances. Like I love wearing this with Mod Vanilla as well as Choco Musk. But I definitely don't like this kind of dynamic where I feel like I can only spray this on my clothing and not on my skin, because if I do spray it on my skin, it just turns a little bit unpleasant. It doesn't stink by any means, but it's like at that point I would rather wear something else, because it does just have a very polarizing smell that only the ultimate vanilla lover would appreciate. Let's talk about its performance. Pretty solid. On my skin, I would say I get around 4 to 6 hours, so pretty standard for this kind of vanilla eau de parfum fragrance. When I sprayed it on my sweatshirt, I could literally still get whiffs of this like very creamy vanilla a day later. So it totally lasted like a really long time on my clothing. So I was actually quite impressed with its longevity, because I didn't really expect that kind of lasting power for something that smells like a really edible vanilla. As for its sillage, this does hang close to the skin. It's very moderate and people aren't really going to smell you unless they're, I would say, a few feet away from you. But yeah, I mean, this isn't really a fragrance that you would want people to smell from across the room. Overall, the performance of Vanilla Milk is actually pretty good, so I will give it that. For my overall rating of Vanilla Milk by Ellis Brooklyn, this is kind of a hard one for me to rate, because to me it is a really beautiful scent. So lactonic, like it's one of the most creamy and lactonic and most realistic vanilla scents I've ever smelled. So in that regard, I really like it. But I also understand why it's so polarizing and controversial, and why it's literally one of the most hated fragrance in the community. And on top of that, I absolutely hate how the bottle looks. Like, it's not like, I wouldn't say it's blatantly ugly, it's just like tacky, it looks cheap, and like for $108 you need to do better than this. So for my overall rating, I would give this fragrance like a B-. This is definitely a fragrance that I would suggest at least smelling in person, just because I think that there are people who could really like this, because it has an extremely unique vanilla kind of scent. But I definitely would advise against blind buying this, because there's a reason why it averages like 3 out of 5 stars on Fragrantica. If you guys have smelled this fragrance, definitely let me know your thoughts. If you're new to my channel, definitely make sure to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon.